Welcome everyone. My name's Jackie Raymond and I'm a lecturer at the Australian Catholic University in the area of integral ecology. And I'm also a co-founder of the Laudato Si movement and supporting the work in Oceania. And today it's an absolute privilege to invite you to be part of a launch event of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. I'd like to start by firstly acknowledging the country where I'm speaking from today, and in doing so, invite you to acknowledge the land, the seas, the sky where you are. So I'm speaking from Larrakia country. It's right where the Arafura Sea is at the top of Australia, and it really is the closest place I could be at this point to the border of Australia, which meets with Oceania and Asia. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the custodians of this land, this water, this place, which goes back millennia of taking care of country, taking care of relationships with everything. And in doing so, I invite you to place in the chat the country where you are. This brings about a dialogue for us that connects through creation to one another. I'd also like to just briefly cover what this is about. The launch of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is a campaign that now includes faith communities. And in particular today, we invite participation from Catholic communities across Asia and Oceania. We're aiming to establish a powerful collective action that's rooted in integral ecology, the call from Pope Francis in Laudato Si, which brings together all wisdom, traditions, knowledges and understandings to care for our common home. This treaty is about guiding us towards a safe climate and a sustainable low-carbon future within an integral ecology worldview. This engagement involves raising awareness about the climate impacts of fossil fuels, the great danger that we're facing and that future generations are inheriting unless we change the course of our lives. Nurturing policy dialogues is part of this process, and we're also then joining and collaborating to foster international partnerships and work with many across the world in this treaty in the lead up to COP28. Some of the speakers that we invited for this event were unable to attend, and that's because in some places they have been what's known as red tagged. The act of red tagging entails branding individuals and organisations as supporters of the communist armed struggle, serving as a method to intimidate environmentalists and Indigenous communities opposing government-backed projects. Unfortunately, this practice has led to harmful and even fatal outcomes for people who are red tagged. So it places them in peril. That's why we've had some difficulty with some of the engagement for this event. It shows how much of a hot topic this is and the dangers for people to be involved in some countries. So we're going to start with some prayer with Pope Francis. We're going to acknowledge in this prayer that we're part of the season of creation, which began on the 1st of September. And this is a message from the Pope that invites us all to be part of this season and to make the changes of ecological conversion. Thanks so much, Father Eduardo.
Father Eduardo, you might need to share the sound of your computer.
Apologies for the sound issue. We try again.
Dopodomani, 1 settembre, si celebra la giornata mondiale di preghiera per la cura del creato, inaugurando il tempo del creato che durerà fino al 4 ottobre, festa di San Francesco di Assisi. In quella data ho intenzione di pubblicare un'esortazione, una seconda Laudato Si. Uniamoci ai nostri fratelli e sorelle cristiani nell'impegno di custodire il creato come dono sacro del creatore. È necessario schierarsi al fianco delle vittime delle ingiustizie ambientali e climatica, sforzandosi di porre fine alla insensata guerra alla nostra casa comune, che è una guerra mondiale terribile quella. Esorto tutti voi a lavorare e pregare affinché essa abbondi nuovamente di vita.
So as we
settembre si celebra la giornata mondiale.
Thank you, Father Eduardo. So as we're beginning this launch event, we call to mind the gift of Pope Francis's amazing leadership at this time where it's so much needed. And we pray that this treaty will be able to make the difference that we seek. We ask this through Christ our Lord. I'd now like to invite Brother John Din to open up our storytelling session. We're going to hear from some different voices that is really going to capture a sense of what this treaty is about and why it's so needed. Over to you, Brother John.
Good afternoon to all. Rainy greetings to you all from the south of the Philippines. As Jackie was saying there, we were now proceeding to the storytelling. The Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is a treaty that we are advancing globally, but it is felt at the local level. This is where local stories are very important. This is the stories of individuals, of communities, are very important in showing how the climate emergency, or what Pope Francis calls the war against creation, is really, really very rapidly affecting the local communities. So one of the storytellers this afternoon that I'd like to introduce to you is Father Warren Puno. Father Warren graduated from St. Francis Seminary and was ordained priest in 2006. Prior to his current role, he held positions as formator, professor, and associate professor in various parishes. His life took a significant turn when he was assigned to Quezon Province in the Philippines. In Quezon, Father Warren became deeply involved in a community struggle against the proposed construction of the 1,200 megawatt coal-fired power plant in the area. This experience transformed him into a passionate and anti-coal advocate. He actively engages in consultation sessions organized by the municipal council, aiming to foster dialogue between local government officials and the proponents of the controversial projects. Father Warren currently heads the Ecology desk within the Diocese of Lucena, where he continues his dedicated efforts towards environmental and community causes. Father Warren will not only be speaking from his personal experience, but also from the experience of the community that he accompanies. Welcome, Father Warren.
Thank you very much, Brother John, and good afternoon from the South Luzon, Philippines. From Quezon Province, I could say the power capital of Luzon. We are hosting about more or less 5,000 megawatt power plants here. But unfortunately and sadly, these power plants are run by fossil fuels like coal. Most of them are coal. We don't have renewable energy here in our province, in our diocese. And I stand before you today not as a solitary voice, but as a representative of a community deeply affected by the challenges we face in our pursuit of environmental protection and fossil-free world. Our journey embodies the profound words of Pope Francis in Laudato Si, where he reminds us that the earth, our home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. Today, I share our collective story of struggle, a story that resonates with farmers, fisherfolk, and our entire community. When I arrived in Atimonan in 2015, that was the start of my really serious environmental advocacy. I, with some of my fellow brother priests, was confronted with a situation that demanded our unwavering commitment to preserving our environment and also helping our community. The proponents of these power plants had engaged with numerous stakeholders determined to obtain the environmental compliance certificate and proceed with their project. Yet, repercussions on our community were so profound. Number one, the first problem and the struggle that we have encountered here was land grabbing. No? So, since they will be putting a power plant, they will be needing more or less 150 hectares of land. And the residents living on the land designated for the project were asked to leave their homes and relocate to housing provided by the company. The company will offer a little sum of money, like 250,000, in exchange of their houses. No, so and they also promised to give them relocation. And promise them livelihood on that place where they will be relocated. This means that leaving their homes and relocate to housing provided by the company. This meant severing ties with their source of livelihood and relocating to places with limited opportunities. In the words of Laudato Si, Pope Francis writes, the human environment and the natural environment deteriorate together. We cannot adequately combat environmental degradation unless we attend to causes related to human and social degradation. Another problem is the environmental destruction. The indiscriminate cutting of trees occurred open without the necessary permits. Half of our mountain landscape where the power plant will be put was devastated to accommodate the project's needs. Pope Francis reminds us, because all creatures are connected, each must be cherished with love and respect. For all of us as living creatures are dependent on one another. What is the impact of this project on our fisherfolk? Our fishermen were prohibited from fishing near the proposed power plant site, as if the seashore and sea had already been bought. The construction of the port or jetty led to severe damage to corals and marine life. In the spirit of Laudato Si, Pope Francis tells us, we have to realize that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. In the face of these challenges, we remained resolute. We filed complaints with various government agencies and called upon the World Bank through the International Finance Corporation to investigate the banks funding this project. The investigation is ongoing. After 9 long years of tireless struggle against the coal-fired power plant project, we received news early this year that the proponent was abandoning the project. it was a moment of victory for all of us. Yet, we could not fully rejoice, for they announced their intent to switch to a liquefied natural gas power plant, a different fossil fuel. Our community stance remained the same, advocating for clean, renewable energy from the very beginning. I am not supposed to share to you this afternoon, but because of the recent events in our campaign in this town of Patimonan, just last 10 days ago, some of our leaders, community leaders, and even myself was red tagged. A group of military came to a certain community and telling the news that this Father Puno and some of my collaborators in that community is being used by the communists. And I really told them that it was a foul, and maybe they received a wrong intelligence and wrong news about us. We just had our information, education, and communication activity on that barangay, on that community, and this military had the pictures of us and telling the community leaders there that we are being used by the communist group. And the one who's supposed to share, they told me that not to go there in their place for security reasons. And even some of them asked me to leave this town or this place. But I believe that this is purely intimidation, since we have serious really campaign against this project, because they were telling that the proponents were telling that they have to secure the environmental compliance certificate before this year ends. And so we also filed a complaint to the EMB, the DNR, the different agencies of the government with concerns with this project. And maybe that's the reason why they really try to intimidate us, but we will not be intimidated. No, I will not be intimidated. I will continue to fight for this, for the environment, for the community, and they cannot intimidate me. It is risky. This work and this advocacy are really risky. But I was telling my friends and my family that, I'm a priest. Though I have a big family, but I don't have a particular family to support, or even I die, fighting for this. No family will be left, because I'm a priest. So I'm really ready to die, and I'm really ready to die for this advocacy, and for the protection of our common home. And so please continue to, I want to thank all of you for your support, your solidarity, and your unwavering commitment to the cause of environmental protection. And together we will continue to stand up for a greener future and protect the planet we call home. As Pope Francis reminds us, we are faced not with two separate cries, one environmental and the other social, but rather with one complex crisis, which is both social and environmental. Thank you very much. And if you have questions later, I will be ready to answer those questions. I cannot tell everything, our story, but this is just a summary of the struggle and the story that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Warren. This is a struggle that we feel across the globe rolling out, and you're in a very vulnerable situation. So we stand with you, and this treaty is about lifting up your voice and your communities and everyone's. Where I am on Larrakia country nearby, there's a huge gas exploration, and the green light has been given by the government here in Australia and in the territory for a huge gas field to be exploited and release a large amount of emissions, more than we've had in a long time. So it's a bit like our Adani story. It's called the Beetaloo project. And I think there'll be a long battle here as well. But the traditional owners are standing proud and strong, as you are, Father Warren. And I'm sure this story is resonating, your story is resonating with so many, as it has with me today. Brother John, I didn't introduce you properly before, but I just want to bring it back to you to say a little bit about you, and then if you could introduce Father Eduardo. But Brother John Din, for some of you who may not know him, is a dedicated advocate and missionary with a diverse academic background in psychology and environmental studies. Since 2016, he's been the national coordinator of the Laudato Si movement in the Philippines, and he currently serves as the regional Justice, Peace and Integrity of Creation coordinator for the Columban missionaries in the Philippines. Over to you, Brother John.
Thank you, Jackie. So we continue with our storytelling. We have heard all the difficulties, but also the victories that were shared there by Father Warren. We would like to introduce to you Father Eduardo Agosta Escarel, who is the Advocacy Senior Advisor for the Laudato Si movement and a climate researcher for the National Research and Technique Council in CONICET, Argentina. Father Eduardo is an expert in climate variability with more than 20 years of experience in climate research and impacts on different regions of the planet. Over to you, Father Eduardo.
Thank you, Jean. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day to everyone. Thank you for this kind invitation to share with you some ideas on the FFNPT. Let me share the PowerPoint that we have prepared for this. Can you see it? I hope so. You might all know that in 2015, we have the COP21 in Paris, in which all countries, nations, governments agreed on taking care for climate change and to combat climate change. They recognized the what. They listened to science for the first time, and they agreed to let the global warming not be over 2 degrees Celsius or better below 1.5 degrees Celsius. In order to achieve that target of Paris Agreement, we need to really make specific options and actions that so far have not been taken. So what do we need now? We need to complement the Paris Agreement with a specific international binding treaty to phase out fossil fuels, because fossil fuels are like the cigarettes for lung cancer, and our world, our planet is suffering from lung cancers, and we need to stop smoking these cigarettes. We need to stop fossil fuels. You might remember Pope Francis' message for the day of prayer for the care of creation on September the 1st. He speaks of we need to end the era of fossil fuels. In the last couple of years, a block of Pacific nations, Pacific island nations, superheaded by Vanuatu and Tuvalu, are calling for developing such a Fossil Fuels Non-Proliferation Treaty at the UN. You might know that only in COP26, 2 years ago in Glasgow, the issue of fossil fuels were for first time mentioned in the cover papers of these international climate summits. Then again, last year, a few more countries united to thinking about the importance of fossil fuels phase out. We are speaking of about 80 countries, but we need to increase the number of countries who are speaking of including some kind of phasing out of fossil fuels. But specifically, the treaty has been supported so far by at least 6 countries in the Pacific Islands, and we need to widen that kind of number of countries. This is the chronology of how the different countries' governments have made these political calls for a fossil fuels non-proliferation treaty. This on the 24th of this month is going to be the first anniversary of Vanuatu calling at the UN General Assembly for this binding treaty. Then Tuvalu in November, and Fiji Islands, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Niue, Austin. Austin, the capital of Texas, has been also looking for that. And the European Parliament this year, they established an article in looking for ahead of COP28. They did it last year for COP27, but this year they are making more support on that. And some other countries in the Pacific region are also, 6 countries are looking for that. And we need to support them. The church is supporting their call, as we'll see later today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Father Eduardo. It's so good to see that summary of what has happened in the last less than 12 months with this important initiative and in the lead up to COP28. So it's really gathering momentum now. And some of that momentum is being harnessed, of course, through faith communities around the globe. We're going to hear now from Philippa Rowland about how faith communities are responding. And Philippa was one of the first representing faith communities to sign on to the treaty. A bit of background about Philippa Rowland. So she holds the position of president at the Multi-Faith Association of South Australia and serves as the chair of Religions for Peace Australia. Philippa was trained as an agricultural scientist, and she contributed to sustainable farming practices and national environmental management plans for biodiversity, pesticides, heavy metals and ozone depleting substances while she was employed by the Australian federal government at CSIRO. Since 2003, Philippa has dedicated her life to community engagement with a primary focus on climate change and environmental concerns. Her work is centred around community-driven solutions for climate change, particularly transitioning to energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. And she collaborates with the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change and is a founding member of the Green Faith International Network. Philippa, over to you, and if you could share a bit about your sense of this movement of the treaty and how you've become involved. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jackie. And I think the bit that was important that was left out was that I also had the very good fortune to work under Jackie Raymond for 2 years around the time of the launch of Laudato Si. So I had the opportunity to read and reflect deeply on that very pivotal document released by Pope Francis. And I guess it moves me not to tears, but it does deeply move me that dear man now feels he needs to write a second, that we humans were not awake enough to listen to the first Laudato Si, and we are needed, to be given a reminder. I was very deeply glad in my current role to be able to sign this non-proliferation treaty on fossil fuels as the chair of Religions for Peace. And one of the projects that I will take forward into the next 6 to 18 months is looking at getting up a climate flagship project across the Asian Conference of Religions for Peace. And one of the challenges and the opportunities I'm putting up for communities participating is the chance both to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty on fossil fuels and also to support efforts to support ending biocide, the ending of impacts on biodiversity. But if I go back a few steps to my own personal journey, I guess I was a child of the 1960s, and that meant that I grew up in the long shadow of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the absolute horror at the thought that the so-called human intelligence had created something so terrible that it could threaten the very sanctity of life on Earth. And those impacts of nuclear weapon and the nuclear fuel cycle have actually spread far further than the radiation from those two terrible bombings. That includes nuclear testing carried out into the Pacific and across the Maralinga lands here in South Australia where I live, with a legacy of radioactive fallout, genetic damage and intergenerational trauma across many, many native lands. So now I'm 60 and we are faced by that unsettling, disturbing fact that our human population's deep addiction to the burning of fossil fuels is now threatening future generations of all life forms with this rapid escalation of climate change. And that, I believe, is quite a moment to ponder, that we're now at a point in history that there are communities calling for a non-proliferation treaty on fossil fuels of the magnitude and extent of the non-proliferation treaty on nuclear weapons, in recognition that the impacts of the burning of fossil fuels threaten life on Earth as we know it. So I don't know what it's like where you're sitting, and I'm safe and comfortable in the Adelaide Hills after a wet 3 years. But at the beginning of a fire season this year, which is predicted to be possibly as bad as our Black Summer of 2019. And all around me, I can see we have now reached that predicted increased intensity and frequency of extreme events that were to be the hallmark of human-induced climate change. And I think that moves me to think about how, as humans, we respond in justice to First Nations, justice to future generations, justice to all the other creatures that share this planet Earth with us. So the Non-Proliferation Treaty on Fossil Fuels, I felt it was very important to sign as the Chair of Religions for Peace Australia, because my own country, Australia, as Jackie mentioned, is still pushing ahead with new coal and gas projects, despite the clear evidence that our world cannot afford for us to do them, and that their true costs will fall upon the innocent lives in many other countries and on subsequent generations. It's unthinkable to be going ahead with short-term money-making exercises when it's so clear what the impacts are now, let alone what they'll be if they're allowed to increase. So I feel it's terribly important that we stand together as people of faith and speak out against these evils and be in strong solidarity with the positive elements alive in our communities. Everywhere I look around, I also see hope and commitment and solidarity for people working for the future of our beleaguered planet Earth. And I feel that if we can stand together from all corners of our fragile world and say enough, we must move away from fossil fuels. Australia has the potential to be a very helpful player in this field. We're very blessed with natural resources of sun and wind. We have the opportunity to help other countries in our region make swift transition to renewable energy. And it's unconscionable for our governments to pretend that their left hand does not know what their right hand is doing. So for us to be working strongly to help other countries, but at the same time go ahead with these fossil fuel projects, does not make sense. And I think since we have freedom of speech here, and I do believe I'm not about to be red carded or red tagged, but we shall see, that it's really incumbent upon us to use our fundamental freedom of speech to speak out on behalf of future generations and support this non-proliferation treaty on fossil fuels and do what we can to extend it to our neighbours in our region and across the world, and in the hopes it gets up and gains some traction in future years. Thank you, Jackie, very much, and the Laudato Si movement for allowing me to share today.
Thank you, Philippa. Thanks for your fabulous leadership. You know, the interfaith space is one that calls for great skill, and you bring so much of that. And we thank you for the leadership that you are constantly displaying and showing and encouraging in everybody at this time. So we're going to hear now from a leader in the Oceania context, and I think it's really interesting that this treaty has emerged from Vanuatu and Tuvalu. It's no mistake why, but it's fabulous that it's coming from the small island nations most affected, like their other island brothers and sisters across the Pacific. So we've got a short video here from the president of the Pacific island of Vanuatu, who made this speech in May last year, 2022.
We call for the development of a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty to phase down coal, oil and gas production in line with 1.5 degrees Celsius and enable a global just transition for every worker, community and nation with fossil fuel dependence. We call on states to join the group of nations proposing to include the crime of ecocide in the Rome Statutes. Acting with knowledge of severe and widespread or long-term damage to the environment can no longer be tolerated.
So that's the call that was heard last May, and obviously we invited leaders from Vanuatu and Tuvalu to be part of this with us today, and they're actually somewhere quite special at the moment, bringing this same message to the world. So we'll share a bit about that later on. Oh, in fact, here's a slide to show it. So here you can see the leaders of Vanuatu and Tuvalu, and they're at the moment presenting their case to the international courts and tribunals, talking about the impact on oceans with fossil fuels and the climate change impacts that are similar to the atmosphere being measured and understood. The same impacts are happening obviously in the oceans, causing acidification, coral reef bleaching, and the list goes on to the impacts. So we'll hear more from that. I think if we're looking at it on the news, it's going to be covered over the next week. So keep your eyes out for how that tribunal hearing results, what comes in. And now we're going to hear from another young voice who has been part of signing up to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And Brother John, if you could introduce Mitzi for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Just before I introduce Mitzi, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Bishop Alwin de Silva, who is here. We will be introducing Bishop Alwin later. So we will continue listening the stories. I'd like to introduce to you Mitzi Salcedo. Is graduated at Ateneo de Davao University with a Bachelor of Science major in Environmental Science. She is one of the co-conveners of Integral Ecology Network Mindanao, that promotes climate mitigation and sustainability and local environmental issue. She currently works as Sustainability Officer of Ecoteneo, the environmental arm of Ateneo de Davao University. Over to you, Mitzi.
Good day, everyone. I am Mitzi Salcedo, again, currently working as Sustainability Officer of Ecoteneo Office, the environmental arm of Ateneo de Davao University. Also one of the conveners of the Integral Ecology Network in Mindanao. The Mindanao Island has always been known for its rich resources, where the food basket of the Philippines is based. Our island is where the lush landscapes and vibrant ecosystems remind us daily of the urgent need to protect our planet. I am here to share with you the initiatives for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty movement that have been taking root in our community in the realm of ecological advocacy and to shed light on the creation of the Integral Ecology Network. Mindanao, with its rich biodiversity and natural wonders, has long been a cradle of ecological diversity. Yet, it also has the areas where 15 mining industries owned by foreign and transnational corporations. Just as many countries, Mindanao has served and heavily extracted of the raw materials for capitalist production to unsound development. Sadly to say, the country is heavily dependent on fossil fuel and became one of the vulnerable countries in Asia Pacific that is prone to disasters from climate change and unjust human activities. Like many regions around the world and geographically speaking, we are unfortunate and never been spared from the consequences of climate crisis and from the relentless pursuit of fossil fuels. Rising sea levels threaten our coastal communities. Extreme weather events disrupt lives and livelihoods, and the loss of precious biodiversity looms over us like a shadow. In response to these challenges, we have come together to form the Integral Ecology Network, a coalition of passionate individuals, organizations, and communities dedicated to safeguarding our environment and promoting sustainable practices. Our mission is this, and it is clear. 1. Consolidate and strengthen local issues that resonate with the global campaign for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And number 2, empower communities to be ecologically aware and lead the campaign for a fossil-free Philippines. Our network recognizes that addressing collaboration and unprecedented scale, we understand that by consolidating our efforts and uniting our voices about meaningful change.
Mitzi, you've just faded out for us here. Can you hear us? Perhaps it's a internet dropout, a bit of a glitch. We're sorry to lose Mitzi at this point as she's sharing the story. Mitzi, are you back? Are you there? We've just lost you, Mitzi, so we might move on. We're sorry that we didn't get to hear the rest of your story, but if you join us, we might be able to do a part 2. But clearly, this work that you're involved in is something we need to hear more about. So we'll come back to you. What we'd like to do now, we've heard several stories and they're really powerful ones. Father Warren, Philippa Rowland, Mitzi's beginning of the story. Plus we heard Father Eduardo unpack for us the origins of the treaty and the President of Vanuatu's message last year. So just invite you to take a moment to contemplate these stories, to notice what's resonating with you at this time, And to support us on the journey of contemplating, we'd like to share with you a recent video. It's a song you may have heard before. It was written by Archbishop Peter Lloyd Chong. It's a song of lament about climate change, and it's been put into a more recent video with the Tagi production performance. Thanks so much.
Island people, raise your cries for the world to hear. Island victims, united we rise to save our Earth. The poor are crying. We can't protect our home. Mother Earth is crying. Let's save our home. Big family. The children are crying, drowning in a rising sea level. Big sister, brother, the island children are roaming. As climate change destroys our home, the poor are crying. Stop the CO2 emissions. Mother Earth is crying. Stop burning the coal. Raise your rise for the world to Island victims, united we rise. Save our, save our, save our. The poor are crying. Can't protect our home. Mother Earth is crying. Let's save our home. The children are hungry as the fish are dying. Love to leave a new one. The light waves as money waves. Now the earth, the poor are crying. Stop the mining. Our earth is crying. Stop the logging. This is our reality, people of the ocean. We gotta rise to stop the violation. nation against creation. We see our reality, Mother Earth is crying. Destruction is real. We can no longer watch from the sidelines. We're holding our voices. Legal rights to protect our home. The poor are crying. Our Mother Earth is crying. Stop the logging, stop the mining. We've got to protect our home. Stop the logging, stop the mining. We've got to protect our home.
So now we have Mitzi, who has been able to come back to us. There's very bad weather where she is at the moment, but thanks for coming back, Mitzi. Would you like to pick up where you left off for us? Are you there, Mitzi? There you are.
Good day. Thank you.
Welcome
Thank you
back. That's okay.
for
Thanks for
giving me-
joining us again.
Yes. Finally, I'm settled down. Now I will continue my message.
Thank you.
So in response to these challenges, we have come together to form the Integral Ecology Network, a coalition of passionate individuals, organizations, and communities dedicated to safeguarding our environment and promoting sustainable practices. Our mission is this, and it is clear. 1, consolidate and strengthen local issues that resonate with the global campaign for Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And 2nd, empower communities to be ecologically aware and lead the campaign for a fossil-free Philippines. Our network recognizes that addressing the climate crisis requires collaboration on an unprecedented scale. We understand that by consolidating our efforts and uniting our voices, we can amplify our impact and bring about meaningful change. Together, we are creating a resilient and interconnected community that is committed to the principles of integral ecology, a concept rooted in the belief that all living beings and the environment are interconnected. Integral Ecology Network works hand in hand with strategic partners and policy advocates for climate change mitigation and sustainability. Our approach is multifaceted. First, we engage in grassroots initiatives that raise awareness and empower local communities to take action through educational campaigns, tree nurturing activities, and climate resilience workshops. We equip our fellow Mindanaoans with the knowledge and tools to combat climate change. Second, we foster dialogue and collaboration among diverse stakeholders, from indigenous communities to government bodies, to ensure that the voices of the most affected by climate change are heard and their needs addressed. Lastly, we are advocating for Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty that is linked to local issues and struggles in the context of Mindanao and Asia Pacific. We believe that projects that are not aligned to protect the ecology, such as fossil gas, waste to energy projects, and nuclear waste dumping in the Pacific, among others, should be opposed by the youth in Asia, Oceania, and the Pacific. We believe that the only way forward is to halt the expansion of fossil fuel production and move forward with just transition to renewable energy sources. By advocating for this treaty, we are advocating for our survival, the survival of our beautiful Mindanao, and the survival of our planet. It is essential that we come together, not as isolated voices, but as unified voice demanding change. Together, we can protect our environment, our communities, and our future. In conclusion, the Integral Ecology Network is not just an organization, it is a movement fueled by the collective determination to preserve our planet for generations to come. I invite each and every one of you to join us in this critical journey, for in unity, there is strength, and in action, there is hope. Thank you. Daghang salamat in our layman terms, and let us continue to work hand in hand for a sustainable and resilient Mindanao, the Philippines, and a better world for all.
Thank you so much, Mitzi. It's really wonderful to hear the great work that you're doing, the collaborative nature of it, the interconnectedness of the movement, and the hope that this brings us all. And your invitation for everyone to join, I think, is fabulous because, as everyone has been hearing, we are at a point where we need to draw a line in the sand and say that is enough burning of fossil fuels, enough exploration of oil, gas, and the time is now because we've seen so much damage up to this point. It's time for us, a bit like the 1.5 degrees Celsius petition in 2015, which in a short space of time gathered a huge amount of petition behind it, to endorse this treaty in the lead up to COP28. So now we're going to move to hear about what I think Mitzi was also pointing to is some of the theology, the theology that underpins and motivates because of the way that we hold beliefs about who we are and why we're here, connecting as people, gifts to the planet, and all the gifts of creation we're called to be the custodians of. So firstly, we're going to hear from Bishop Joey and then Bishop Alwyn de Silva. So I'd just like to hand over to Brother John to introduce our speakers. Thanks, Brother John.
Thank you, Jackie. So I'd like to introduce to you all Bishop Jose Ramirez Rapadas III. Bishop Joe is a dedicated priest since his ordination in 1999, possesses a deep theological background with a licentiate in dogmatic theology from the Loyola School of Theology at Ateneo de Manila, Philippines. Over the span of 2 decades in the priesthood, Bishop Rapadas has faithfully served in various pastoral capacities, including Parish Vicar and Coordinator of Diocesan Social Pastoral Ministry. Additionally, he has shared his knowledge and wisdom as seminary professor, served as rector of a seminary, and taught religious studies. On June 13, 2019, Pope Francis honored him with the appointment of Bishop of Iligan, and he became the youngest bishop in the entire Philippines at the age of 46. This appointment underscores his exceptional dedication and leadership within the Catholic Church.
Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, today I stand before you not only as a humble servant of our faith, but also as a concerned steward of the earth. The Holy Father, Pope Francis, called to stop the worldwide war against our common home, and during the general audience prayer for the celebration of the season of creation this month. Brothers and sisters, as we gather in unison for the celebration of the season of creation, I invite you to see this as an opportunity to reflect upon a matter of great urgency and moral responsibility. And I'm speaking of our collective responsibility to protect creation from the danger and the threat of climate change. There is a need to support a well-meaning advocacy related to the fossil fuel consumption, which reflects how deeply we have been disconnected to ecology these days. So I am supporting the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, a campaign that involves prayers for leaders of nations with responsibilities in the upcoming COP, and for all those tasked with immediate decisions to address the climate crisis and related advocacies. This campaign resonates deeply with our spiritual values and our collective voice in the Pacific region to address this looming impact of climate emergency. Brothers and sisters, a very solid scientific consensus indicates that we are presently witnessing a disturbing warming of the climatic system. In recent decades, this warming has been accompanied by a constant rise in the sea level, and it would appear also by an increase of extreme weather events, even if a scientifically determinable cause cannot be assigned to each particular phenomenon. We are called to recognize the need for changes of lifestyle, production, and consumption in order to combat this warming, or at least the human causes which produce or aggravate it. This is the very essence of our faith, which teaches us that we are entrusted with the sacred task of nurturing and preserving all of God's creation, our common home. Yet, as the shadows of environmental degradation loom large, we find ourselves at a critical juncture where our actions can determine the fate of our planet for generations to come. The scientific consensus is clear, and the signs of our planet's distress are all around us. The melting glaciers, the rising sea levels, extreme weather events, patterns, and the displacement of countless vulnerable communities. The relentless extraction and combustion of fossil fuels not only accelerate the warming of our planet, but they also perpetuate the social injustices and economic disparities that disproportionately affect the marginalized and the voiceless among us. Brothers and sisters, I encourage each one of you, the faithful, to push for this treaty, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. We do more than simply address the technological and economic aspects of the climate crisis. We bear witness to the power of unity as nations and as communities come together to break free from the chains of dependency on finite resources that have fueled both progress and destruction. Our message is one of hope, the hope that our actions today can pave the way for a cleaner and more equitable tomorrow. Let us be clear, brothers and sisters, the journey towards a world less reliant on fossil fuels will not be easy. It will be arduous. It will require sacrifices, innovative solutions, and as well as the commitment of leaders across every sector of society. But let us not forget that throughout our human history, humanity has triumphed over seemingly insurmountable challenges when driven by a shared purpose. and a sense of moral duty. As followers of our faith, we are called to lead by example, to care for the least among us, and to be stewards of the earth. By embracing fossil fuel non-proliferation, we honor these principles and demonstrate our reverence for the Creator's masterpiece, the intricate tapestry of life that flourishes within this fragile biosphere. So in conclusion, brothers and sisters, let us celebrate the season of creation with a renewed strength in caring for our common home. Let our voices rise as a chorus of compassion, and may our steps echo the rhythm of harmony with nature. Together then, let us forge a path towards fossil fuel non-proliferation, a path that leads to a better future. May God's grace guide us, and may His creation forever thrive under our loving care. This is Bishop Jose Rapadas III of the Diocese of Iligan, Lanao del Norte, the islands of Mindanao, the Philippines. May God bless us.
And Brother John, that was just a great message, and for all of us, and something that we can share with our local bishops in the regions where we find ourselves, to encourage the same kind of leadership to come from our leaders and from everyone, because as you know, as individuals, we can endorse the treaty, and as leaders of organisations everywhere can do the same. I'd also like to mention that we're going to hear from Bishop Alwyn de Silva, who was actually the very first bishop to endorse the treaty in the region of Asia Oceania. Brother John, would you like to introduce Bishop Alwyn's video, and then we can perhaps hear from him as he's joined us for this gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. So we welcome Bishop Alwyn de Silva from the Archdiocese of Bombay, has dedicated his life to advocating for justice and peace and environmental stewardship. Bishop Alwyn holds a master's degree in political science from the University of Mumbai. His ministry has been marked by a deep involvement in the lives of the marginalized communities, particularly in the slums of Mumbai, where he was deeply involved in human rights issues, social concerns, and environmental matters. With over 35 years of teaching experience at St. Pius X College in Mumbai, he has also influenced countless students. Bishop de Silva's dedication to environmental causes is evident through his current role as the chairman of the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences, FABC, Office of Human Development and Climate Change Desk. Bishop Alwyn de Silva impressive journey reflects a lifetime of service and leadership, and his multifaceted contributions continue to make a profound impact in India and beyond. Let us watch the video of Bishop de Silva.
My dear friends, I'm here as the chairperson of the Office of Human Development and Climate Change of the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conference. A few days ago, I participated in a webinar organized by the Laudato Si movement. I'm here to show support for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. We all realize the dangers of climate change. We have experienced the effects of climate change. we are aware of the various efforts being put to prevent this rise in temperature. This is another step which is very important, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. The Paris Agreement doesn't mention fossil fuels. COP27 outcome didn't mention oil and gas. So I think it's time that we all join hands together to show our solidarity in trying to persuade governments and other important people who are responsible for this climate change, for this climate emergency. We need governments to join a bloc of Pacific nations spearheaded by Vanuatu and Tuvalu in developing a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Health, safety, and security is what the world needs, and it's possible to get there, but it requires ending the area of coal, oil, and gas. So I would like to request all of you to join this bloc of Pacific nations in their call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty to complement the Paris Agreement by accelerating an equitable shift away from fossil fuels to affordable, abundant, clean energy for all. It is a fact that today a few governments have promised to have this fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. But we require also the business people. We also require communities. We want people who influence the policies and the decision-making in our countries. So I would like to tell you that the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference is with you, and we are trying our best and will try our best to have this fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty in the next COP meeting. I wish you all success, and I'm with you, and the FABC is with you.
Thank you for that wonderful message, Bishop Elwyn. We can see that you're with us. You're in transit somewhere. Would you like to say a few words that connect the theology of the message around vulnerability and why you signed it so early on?
It may be difficult because I'm traveling in the car.
I could see that.
Participating in this Zoom meeting.
No problem.
It will be going on and off. But I would like to say that there's one thing that this spirituality.
Yeah.
Never mind. We tried, and of course that was risky, but it's great that you're with us, Bishop Elwyn. We've just unfortunately lost you there. You dropped out, but it's wonderful that you've joined us, and your message is incredibly important and inspiring. We thank you for that, and we plan on sharing it. Obviously, today's the launch of this for our movement, and we'll be sharing it widely, not just in the region, but across the world as well, to encourage everybody to endorse it. So we're now going to move into our next phase of our journey with the launch, which takes us to a place of dialogue, the most important aspect of action that can help shape the future for this story and for our common home. So I'll hand over to Brother John now, who's going to guide this process of small group dialogue so that you can participate and bring your voice to the journey. Over to you, Brother John.
Thank you, Jackie. We have spent a couple of minutes and hours, I think, listening to the stories. And maybe just to remember the story that was told there by Father Warren, by Philippa, by Mitzi, and from the two bishops who just shared the theology of vulnerability. It's interesting that all these initiatives of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty started from the small island. We listened to the stories of the small islands. We listened to the stories of the periphery in the Philippines, in Lucena, who are struggling against fossil fuels. And we're also listening to the stories of the poor who are the victims of our addictions to fossil fuels. So we will now engage in what we call the dialogue session. We will be going into small groups. We will have a breakout groups of 4 to 5 people. And basically, we would like to invite you to explore, maybe help with these 2 questions that we have in your screen. What touched you when you listen to the speakers today, to the storytellers today, and why? And the second is, how can the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty help us move away from our addiction to fossil fuels and support local and global context? So that's the 2 questions that we would like you to engage in the conversations and in a dialogue in a small groups. And we will be back in the plenary after 15 minutes. So you have enough time for 4 to 5 people to engage in a dialogue. Over to you, Father Edu.
Please click the join button to participate in the small dialogue at this time. Hello, Philippa. I think most of us are coming back into the room now, so we want to invite you, and Brother John, you might like to do this, to invite people to use the chat to share what came up for them.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome all back to the plenary. I hope you had enough time to share in the small groups. So I'd like to invite you just to share in the chat groups. Maybe if you're able to write what any emerging insights while you were engaged in dialogue with your companions in your own groups. So can I invite you just to write in the chat insights, initiatives that was shared there, or questions that came out in the group. So just feel free and please write that in the chat box. There's some message here from Ronald Adlawan, renewed hope.
I think that's a really great message from Ronald, isn't it? Because for so long we've known the reality of needing to change the ways of burning fossil fuels, of extracting them, of having exploration licenses. But I think a lot of us have felt a sense of frustration that we can't seem to get to the point where it's stopping and seeing that change. So this treaty certainly does animate and help galvanise a sense of hope for this. Thanks, Ronald.
Shared interest, this is from Philippa, shared interest in promoting renewable solar energy between Australia and India. Now that's really powerful. Countries involved there. From Modita Soder, utilized 800 terawatts of energy from the sun. Again, this is for the solar energy. Touched by the red card story of bravery, the FFNPT helps us dialogue about the economic challenges of transitioning fossil fuels to renewables. I have endless admirations for priests like the Filipino one who has been red tagged. That's for Father Warren. It's almost like a mark now of a true environmentalist is being red tagged. Unfortunately. And then from Modita Soder, all human activity uses only 12.8 terawatts of energy. Okay. So maybe those who have just come in, please, if you're, feel free to write your insights, questions, or initiatives that you appreciate during the dialogue session with your partners in your group. Okay. This is from Christina. I will aim to get most of the parishioners in my Catholic parish in Australia to sign the treaty. That's great.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I think that really helps us segue to the next section, but feel free to keep placing in the chat anything that's emerging for you at this time around the treaty from that conversation time you've had. I'm sure it was very rich dialogue, and I can see people typing there, which is wonderful. Yes, the role of the youth, just like Mitzi's sharing, is vital. Thank you, Ronald. And Peter Moore has said, support each other to be bold so our voices are amplified. Absolutely. The power of using our voices at this time, it's really, really essential that we do stand up, that we speak to those around us in our natural circles of influence, but actually step outside of that and perhaps write letters to politicians and people who perhaps haven't heard about the treaty. It is a fairly new initiative, so it's a time to share and invite that. So in this journey together today, we'd like to move as we have through the phases. We've heard stories, we've contemplated together, we've heard about the ways in which theology and church leadership is responding from the perspectives of faith, and we've just experienced some dialogue together. Our last phase is co-creating. So to help us co-create as a group meeting together today from across Asia and Oceania, we have a question for you. What can we do to support the treaty in our local and regional communities and beyond? What can we do? Just ponder that for a moment in your heart.
Please give me 5 minutes.
Zicho, you'd like 5 minutes? What would you like the 5 minutes for? To consider the question?
Yes,
Yes.
I would like to some requests shortly. I would like to request a resolution to urge the serious of Fukushima nuclear contaminated water and the end of discharge. Okay. Yeah. First, there is a statement of Bishops' Conference of Korea statement. We oppose the dumping of radioactive contaminated water at Fukushima nuclear power plant. The
Yes.
Fukushima nuclear power plant accident on March 11th, 2011 wreaked formidable radiation as has contaminated near areas and the ocean. Fukushima's radiative water generated about 140 tons per day, 100 tons of radioactive water a day. The 64 species also contain radioactive substances with very long half-life, such as Celsius half-life 2.3 million years. Plutonium half-life is 24,000 years. Iodine half-life 15.7 billion years, very long time.
Very long. Yes.
Multi-nuclear species removal facility, so-called ALPS. But ALPS will only test 9 types due to technical and cost problems. In particular, tritium cannot be tested. Therefore, the Ecological and Environmental Committee of the Catholic Bishops' Council of Korea propose as follows. 1, we should actively seek optimal alternative to minimize the environmental impacts such as ground storage. 2, we urge Japan to be more open and more together with its peace-loving neighbors. 3, in order to eliminate the risk of accidents and the risk of high-level nuclear waste in advance, Korea and the whole world should actively make efforts to switch to eco-friendly renewable energy. Park Hyun-dong Abbas, chairman of the Eco Committee of the Korean Bishop Conference, he said, for more than 30 years and 100 years, Japan has to continue to send contaminated water to the sea. Last year, we also sent a letter of protest to Japan along with the Japanese Bishops' Conference. We plan to cooperate with the Japanese Bishops' Council. Recently, the possibility of dumping high-level nuclear waste into the ocean in the future has also increased, calling nuclear wasted water so-called treated water. On the day of the release of nuclear contaminated water, August 24th, a statement of protest by the Justice and Peace Council of Japan Catholic Church. The name of the statement is protesting against the discharge of contaminated water from Fukushima's first nuclear power plant. Japanese Catholic Council is strongly protesting to release so-called Alps treated water into the sea. So-called Alps treated water is contaminated water in direct contact with melted fuel debris. Contaminated water in direct contact with melted fuel debris. The most important things about how long ocean emissions continue, how much radioactive material is finally released, and how much it pollutes the ocean. Eventually, the total amount of radioactive material emitted into the sea is not clearly disclosed. At the river of connection, the Japanese Catholic Church, Catholic Council for Justice and Peace is strongly protesting the government release of the Alps treatment water in the ocean. And finally, I talk of the 4 requests from the Ecological Environment Committee of the Diocese of Daejeon to Laudato movement to Asian Pacific instead of the committee chairman, Father Kang Seung-soo. 1. A statement calling for an end to marine dumping of Fukushima nuclear contaminated water. 2. Collection, disclosure, and monitoring activities of data related to the discharge of Fukushima's nuclear contaminated water. 3. A close joint response of Laudato activities in Pacific coastal countries. Last 4. Spread the campaign to eradicate marine dumping of nuclear contaminated water and high-level nuclear waste worldwide. That's about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sicho. Thank you for sharing that. And you'll notice in the chat, Sicho, that several people have requested for the statement that you were just talking from to be shared. So the statement from Korea, the bishops in Korea, the statement from the Japanese Conference of Bishops. And we really appreciate that you're bringing this up in this conversation. It's in fact something that we had prepared to bring up as well, because as we know, whenever there is a strong campaign on a particular matter, like fossil fuels, once it becomes clear that there's a tipping point being reached, those who bring about change through an exploitative mindset will very quickly galvanise around another form of extraction and exploitation. And that's when we often hear about nuclear again. In Australia, it comes up when there's a real challenge to the current dynamic of how energy is being sourced and distributed. So we need to be mindful that whilst we mount this campaign strongly, calling for, as the International Energy Agency and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have made clear, that there need to be no new coal and gas projects proceeding if we're going to reach the global limit that we've set of 1.5 degrees. And this means that we need to be alert to the voices that are going to chime in and call for more nuclear power issues to be the current play. So we just have a couple of slides. There's one that's going to come up on the Fukushima nuclear waste issue. so that we can see that our call is for a just transition, that it is about renewable energy that doesn't include nuclear, and that we need to hold the call strongly in a nuanced space for integral ecology to be what we move towards. So we thank you, Sitcho, for what you've shared, and we can follow up with everyone who's registered to be part of this gathering today to receive those messages from Japan and Korea. We also wanted to see if you have any questions about today and about this campaign. There's a slide that we can show, I think it's number 15, Father Eduardo, that if you have anything you want to ask about, there's an email address that you can send your requests to, and it's asiapacific@laudatocmovement.org. So please feel free to share with that. And Sitcho, if you could share your statements through that email, that would be wonderful as well. So we'll just keep it on the screen for another moment for those who might like to write it down. And of course, we are recording the event and we'll share that as well so that you can have a look at it in the future. We also want to share with you the interfaith letter that's emerged in terms of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. So I think that's the next slide. So Father Eduardo, if you could just show that one as well. So
Yes,
thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So we all know that we urgently need to explicitly focus on ending the era of coal, oil, and gas, as Pope Francis said in his message and in several occasions where every time he addressed this issue. In the church, within the Vatican dicastery for promoting the integral human development, and the head of it, the prefect Cardinal Cerny, for several times we have supported this treaty. And in his words, we may say, a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty gives great hope for integrating and strengthening the Paris Agreement. It is also an excellent tool to start the negotiations of climate change mitigation at the United Nations based on science. So in promoting this call to endorse a fossil fuels non-proliferation treaty, especially for faith communities to support this call to our governments to develop this kind of treaty, last year in November the 3rd, we developed a webinar event in which we launched the interfaith letter, in which we are calling our governments for the importance of developing this fossil fuels non-proliferation treaty. You can access to this event launch in our Laudato Si movement website, looking for interfaith letter announcement. I paste here in the upper side of the screen the link in which you can look for that information. But the most important thing is that you go to this link here in which you can directly access the faith letter to read carefully, but also to endorse it, either as an individual or as an organization, as a church, ecclesial, or social environmental organizations. You can go to that direction, and we're gonna paste this link to the chat so that you easily can go directly to that, or also later you can go to that place. So we are inviting you to endorse this faith letter, to read the faith letter and to endorse it either as individual or as organizations.
Thanks so much, Father Eduardo. And we also wanted to share with you the great news that 6 bishops in our region of Asia and Oceania have already endorsed the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. You can see on the screen there who they are, and we would love you to share the messages of this endorsement that's begun and encourage your local bishops and everybody to be part of this movement. And we are certainly moving this level of endorsement, the gathered support towards COP28, where it will be presented. So being part of this global movement really matters at this time, and we encourage you, as Father Eduardo has said, to endorse and to encourage those around you to do the same. We also, the next slide encourages us in the season of creation too, and it highlights what we were just hearing about from Sho, and we thank you for bringing up the fact that the waste dump of nuclear water into the oceans is not only having an impact immediately, but for a very, very long time because of the long half-life of those radioactive elements that are being released, and the impact that we can only imagine, the untold impact on the marine ecosystems that we are deeply connected with in terms of the air we breathe, but also the food we eat from the oceans, and in many other ways. So this message supporting the bishops who are being strong to stand up to the release of that water is something we can do. We can also pray. We know the power of prayer is strong. We can pray about these issues. We can pray about the treaty, and we can certainly pray for the leaders of nations who are going to be meeting at COP28. We can pray for our current leaders in terms of changing their policy and encouraging them to be part of the treaty as well, to join with those who are leading it, the leaders of Vanuatu and Tuvalu and our Pacific nations in our region, and to listen to the voice of youth. These are what our prayers can be directed towards in the season of creation that we're currently celebrating, and that we can continue to lift up through our prayer, through our song, and through our dialogue and conversation, so that we can imagine a future that doesn't include fossil fuels, that doesn't include the waste dumping of water from nuclear power plants. These are the things that need to be in our stories. We need to be praying about these at this time, because there's so much that can flow from the power of these prayers. So you might like to include the hashtag praying for you in your messages, or the hashtag season of creation in this time. And certainly we encourage you to start using the hashtag Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, FFNPT. It's quite a mouthful, so the acronym is helpful in the hashtag there. I also want to mention that as much as we are moving this treaty forward at a time of mitigation needed for 1.5 degrees Celsius as our limit, that the encouragement of our leaders also to include the financial contributions towards loss and damage for communities who are currently suffering from the rise of sea levels, the salinisation of water, the loss of livelihoods. These things are very real, as we know, in our region, and we need the loss and damage story to be supported. So please also encourage your leaders to be strong in terms of their commitment to loss and damage, as well as mitigation. And our next slide, slide 20, we've just shown that. We want to thank you for being part of this gathering, especially Father Eduardo, for your fabulous support there, technically with the slides, with your input about the story and the origin of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, for breaking us into chat groups and so forth. We want to thank all of you for participating, specifically our speakers. Philippa Rowland, I can see you there. Thank you so much. Mr. Your wonderful voice from youth, if you're still with us, we thank you for our video messages that we've heard, for our leaders, and also the team. So Cheryl, wonderful work. Ronald, it's been a pleasure to work with you on this. And Brother John Din, thank you so much for your great contribution. It really is a collaborative effort. Yes, Brother John.
We do also thank Father Warren for bringing a very inspiring sharing. Difficult, but I think we need to be in solidarity with Father Warren and the community he represents in these difficult times. Thank you, Father Warren.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you, Father Warren. And thank you to your community. And we pray for you and those who have been red tagged at this time, for your safety and for the strength of advocacy that you bring to the world today. So we thank you all, and we encourage you to be part of this movement as you are, and bringing your voice, your strength to the story of the treaty. Go forth, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jackie, Cheryl, John, Eduardo.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Go well. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Did you want to play that beautiful song, the Season of Creation song?
Yes, please.
As it's a new begin, sowing the seed of peace to live in harmony. Show me gratitude, working together to save biodiversity. Defender of creation, don't walk away, walk away. Never forget the earth. We are a part of a single human family. Slow down the climate change, changing your lifestyle and imagination. Defenders of nature, don't give up. Listen, listen, just as flow like a river on the way in the desert. Listen, carefully, I'm doing a new thing. Will you not be aware of it? Now it's time for the season of creation, 2023. Speak out loud in favor of victims, the poor and the refugees. Hark with your hearts, beautiful thing concrete to heal their wounds. Take care of the planet and Mother Earth. Listen, listen just as slow like a river, the way in the desert. Listen, carefully I'm doing a new thing. Will you not be aware of it? Listen, listen just as slow like a river, on the way in the desert. Listen, carefully I'm doing a new thing. Will you not be aware of it? Take care of nature in danger, and back to a peaceful heart. Peaceful heart, a peaceful heart. Listen.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie, Father Eduardo, Father Warren, Brother John, Ronald.
Thank you.
Yeah, can we
Thank
stay?
you.
Yeah, can we stay for like 15 minutes or 10 minutes to
Yes,
just have
sure.
some